Need a little luxury in your life? That's why I recently treated myself to a staycation at the Inn at 500 Capital. Whether you're looking for a romantic getaway, a special celebration, or just a break from routine, you're going to love their Four Diamond Boutique experience with gorgeous rooms, penthouses, and suites right in the heart of downtown Boise. You'll be greeted with a complimentary drink on arrival, have access to free shuttle service, and even your pet is welcome. And here's an insider tip: book more than one night and save with their weekend escape rate. Book your stay now at inat500.com. Today on CityCast Boise. DOGE's federal layoffs are hitting Idaho, threatening our public lands. Meanwhile, state lawmakers are making moves to ban pride flags from government buildings while trying to force schools to display the Ten Commandments. Plus, a book ban defeat in Meridian and ideas to help Boise's pollinators. It's Friday, February 21st. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. It's Friday once again, and joining me for our news roundup is political scientist Charlie Hunt. Thanks for being here, Charlie.
Happy to be here as always, Lindsay.
There was so much news to sift through this week, so I hope listeners like the choices we went with, but one that I thought really hit close to home and is affecting a good amount of local people are some of the Trump administration layoffs, especially the layoffs for the Payette and Boise Forest Services. As a political scientist, as somebody really, deep in the political science world, has this happened before and it just didn't make news like it is now? Or are these kind of cuts that we're seeing in the federal government unique?
I think they're bigger than what we would normally see for a new administration. A lot of times where you see cuts to the federal workforce, you would expect to see them coming through Congress, right? Congress is in charge of basically allocating money and forming the federal budget. This is one of the key questions that we've seen in the first few weeks of the Trump administration, is sort of this question of separation of powers, right? Sort of the executive branch kind of grabbing the sort of power of the purse from Congress, from the legislative branch, and going about it in that way by just, rather than going through Congress to zero out programs in the budget or to eliminate USAID, for example, through the federal budget, which is how it would normally happen. The administration, sort of via Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, is just sort of, kind of going it alone and sort of taking the wheel in that way and seeing kind of how far they can go before Congress or the courts intervene. And the courts have already intervened in a couple of ways, but not quite in others.
So it's typically elected officials in Congress, in the legislative branch, controlling budgets, therefore controlling the amount of people employed in the federal government, not Elon Musk and teenage DOGE employees unilaterally making employment decisions.
Typically not. And one of the reasons this is the case, besides sort of the basic poli-sci 101, here's why we separate powers and distribute power so that not all of this power is in the hands of one person or one branch, but also because, if you work through Congress, you have this kind of distributed knowledge, right? You have members of Congress with particular knowledge of their districts, of their states, who know what their states need, what they need the federal government to be able to do for them. And they understand, who are the folks in the federal workforce, for example, who work in their districts and their states. I think there are maybe some misconceptions about sort of who are federal employees. The federal government employs between 2 and 3 million people. It's actually the nation's sort of 15th largest employer. And we think of federal workers, I think, sometimes as people who sort of live in Washington, D.C., but in reality, only about 5 or 10% of all federal employees work in D.C., and the vast, vast majority of them work out in the world, they're sort of what we would call in political science street level bureaucrats. They're healthcare workers for veterans. They're cybersecurity experts, working with Homeland Security. They're the CDC and U.S. Department of Agriculture scientists working on infectious diseases like bird flu, right? And they're people, for example, who work with the Forest Service under the U.S. Department of Ag. And that's where we start to sort of get into direct Idaho impacts.
Well, and I like how you brought up that legislators theoretically should know about their districts and when they're making these budget decisions. I'm going to guess Elon and DOGE don't know about what's going on in Idaho because it's estimated that more than 50 Forest Service workers for the Payette and Boise National Forests were fired. That number could be higher. They're still trying to figure out who all was fired. But these employees were the people who were working on the maintenance of bridges, roads, campgrounds, signage. They were the people who were maintaining the forest to help stop forest fires, which are a huge issue in this area. And so we're seeing these large protests in the small city of McCall, where so many of these employees reside. And now, I mean, one of the things that people love about Idaho is our open spaces, our forest spaces, our outdoor spaces. And the people who work so hard to maintain those, to keep them safe, to keep them usable, have been fired en masse.
I think it's a great point, Lindsay. I think a lot of the services that we're talking about, that sort of, Elon Musk maybe saw as like a line on a budget that was an easy thing to slash, or like a person that was they saw as expendable. The services that they provide, I think, are a lot of things that we take for granted. It's cleaning up trash in our parks. It is keeping the roadways clear. And it is, this order in terms of the USDA, they had made a point of saying, oh, this is non-firefighting related cuts. But even if you're not a firefighter, if your job is to clear brush and clear timber in the Boise or Payette National Forests, like that is firefighting practice, even if you are not like the person in the full firefighter getup, right? So that's like, I think, really important to know. And we are starting to see some pushback from members of Congress, including our own District 2 Representative Mike Simpson, who, to our point earlier, Lindsay, right? Like these are members who know their districts and know the things maybe that Elon doesn't about how exactly and how badly some of these cuts, even if we're only talking about 50 people, right, that this could have really major impacts down the road and unintended consequences that maybe DOGE didn't quite think of.
And I do want to highlight that these employees may not have been coded as firefighters, but a lot of them have red cards. So they're certified to help fight wildfires when needed. And a lot of times they are called up to help. And so, again, this is what happens when you have someone in Washington, just like, a couple of teenagers deleting by code words. You're going to lose people who serve very essential functions. And when they say they're saving money, if Idaho's completely on fire and we can't fight it, how much money was saved? Like how much is that going to cost? It's real easy to say, I'm not paying my mortgage this month. I saved $2,000. But, then if I get evicted in 9 months, then, did I save money?
Well, this is the other thing is like, I don't think anyone's really arguing that like the all of these federal departments are perfect and that they are spending exactly the right amount of money on absolutely everything. Like, no bureaucracy is perfect. And there could have been a version of this Department of Government Efficiency that did sort of organized audits and used science and data analysis to determine, where cuts could be made without completely uprooting people's lives. I mean, the number of stories I've read about this department sort of going in and firing a bunch of people and then realizing like, oh crap, actually these people are really important. We need to hire them back, but we didn't save their contact info. It's more sort of the way that they are going about doing this that to me doesn't really demonstrate that they care so much about about doing this in a way that doesn't totally uproot people's lives. And to me, that's just like not great government practice generally, even if your goal is to cut government.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I don't think the goal here was a thoughtful process to make sure that our government was working in the most efficient, most cost-effective way for taxpayers, for citizens. It just seems to be a slash and burn so that then they can say, we're cutting the waste, we're saving the money. But we'll see what that looks like this summer. We'll see what that looks like for these cities and these areas, when we all want to go hiking, when we all want to go camping. And now suddenly we don't have trails. We don't have people managing campsites. I really wonder what the temperature locally will be for that then.
What sort of promises have you made to yourself this year? Maybe get in better shape or eat healthier, save more money, travel somewhere new. What about discovering a new culture by learning a new language? With Babbel, you can do that in just a few weeks. I'm CityCast CEO David Plotz, and I'm having such a good time learning Spanish on Babbel this year. I'm taking a trip to Mexico City in the spring, and Babbel is giving me the Spanish foundation that's going to make my trip so much better. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by more than 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks, or at whatever pace you choose. And because conversing is the key to really understanding each other in a new language, Babbel is designed using practical, real-world conversations. And one way they do that is with their own podcasts. I'm a podcast listener. I'm guessing since you're listening to this podcast, you are too. And I have been getting ready for my Mexico City trip by listening to Babbel's conversational podcasts. There's a short conversation you listen to, then an instructor talks you through what happened, and then you listen again, and then you catch everything when you listen that second time. There's also a great read-along transcript, too, which I love. The one I did today was with Maria and Carmela trying to make dinner plans, but Carmela is so busy. She's way too busy with work and yoga, but finally they agreed on brunch on Saturday. Studies from Yale, Michigan State, and other universities continue to prove that Babbel works. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. So let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting CityCast listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
At Rocket, we believe everyone deserves their shot at the American dream. So if you're feeling locked out of home ownership, we're here to give you back the keys. We're opening doors, breaking down walls, and doing everything we can to turn renters into owners. And we're not going to stop until we help everyone home. To find out more, visit rocket.com. Rocket, own the dream.
Okay, Charlie, I specifically wanted you here this week because there are two bills that I want to get your take on. House Bill 96 that limits the type of flags that state and local governments can fly. But then there is also House Bill 238 that would require schools to display the 10 Commandments. And so these bills do very different things, but are kind of in opposition to each other philosophically. And so I'm really curious, what are your thoughts on these bills and what they're saying about Idaho or the Idaho legislature?
I think it's a really interesting kind of juxtaposition of these two bills. You have sort of one, on the one hand, House Bill 96, that would sort of restrict or sort of limit the speech of state or local government entities in terms of sort of representing the values of the entire city or the entire county or the entire state. So limiting the types of flags that would be allowed. So the ones that would be allowed would be the American flag, of course, the government entity's own official flag. So the city of Boise flag. When we get our new flag, we'll be able to fly that. The official flags of any U.S. state, Native American tribal flags, military branch flags. So these are the ones that would be allowed. And for this particular bill, right, there's sort of this philosophical question around whether the government, right, an official government entity, should be flying a flag that promotes a particular ideology. That's what Representative Scott and those favoring this bill have said, that like flags that the state or that the city flies should not be lobbied for a particular agenda, right? A political agenda, and that it should be limited to this stuff that theoretically we all agree on or that can unite us. That's sort of the argument put forward in that particular bill.
I definitely think it's a case where, and let's be really clear, they're targeting the pride flag. They're targeting the fact that Boise and a few other cities around the state will fly a pride flag during June or at different times during the year. I think it feels to me as kind of a situation where a certain political ideology made the pride flag political and now wants to ban the pride flag because it's political. It's kind of they created a problem and now they'd like to get rid of it. I do want to highlight that Representative Joe Alfieri from Coeur d'Alene said, quote, "We're overthinking this as we tend to do. This isn't about control. It's about trying to stop government entities from making political statements," end quote. I just have to say, never once have I thought the issue with the Idaho legislature is that they're overthinking issues. That's never, I think, the issue that we're facing.
Well, it's interesting. Like you mentioned Representative Alfieri. Another thing I saw that he said was that this could, in response to the kind of assertion that this is just about the pride flag, which, like, yes, it's a little suspicious. He said, it could be the rainbow flag or it could be a MAGA flag, right? Like a city or county couldn't fly a MAGA flag, which, like, yeah, sure. And I mean, it's interesting. Like this, I don't know that I like necessarily love this bill, but to me, the other bill, right, the one sort of mandating that the 10 Commandments be put up in schools and universities, they would be required to conspicuously display a poster or a framed copy of the 10 Commandments. To me, that one is different in a slightly more insidious way where, limiting the kinds of flags that the city you live in can fly, it doesn't like compel proactive speech and it doesn't compel Idahoans to listen to or participate in a certain kind of speech that they don't agree with. Like Boiseans would still be free, of course, to fly whatever flags they want or engage in whatever speech they want in their own homes and their own lives. But at least in theory, it doesn't expressly kind of discriminate against one type of speech. Whereas to me, this 10 Commandments bill, this is kind of explicitly prioritizing and promoting one religious viewpoint over another in a public space where children have to be and teachers have to be as part of their jobs.
Well, and like you said, it's just this dichotomy within the legislature where they want to force cities to not display certain things, but then force schools that children have to attend it. I mean, they didn't pass the bill that was going to get rid of mandatory education requirements. So children have to be at school. And so they will be forced to be in a space where the 10 Commandments would then legally be required to be displayed prominently. And like you said, it is very insidious. It is, they're trying to get around it by saying, well, we wouldn't use government money for it. It would be a donation. Because the Idaho Constitution does not allow public money to be used for religious promotion within schools. So they're saying, well, it'd be a gift. And of course, I'm sure some entity is just ready to gift all the schools in the state a prominent 10 Commandments display. But like you said, it is forcing that on Idaho students, regardless of their belief system, regardless of their strongly held beliefs. Because are we also going to have a display of the Quran? There's lots of value systems that have, easily displayed values. It's just so blatantly anti-American, honestly.
Well, you mentioned, Lindsay, the constitutional issue, and this is sort of a way of getting around that by saying, like, it's a private donation. Like, I don't think Muslim kids or Hindu kids or kids raised in non-religious households care all that much whether the state is technically paying the bill for the poster, right, which probably costs very little. like they care, and presumably their parents care also. I know you're a parent, Lindsay. Like they probably care whether they are being compelled to look at the poster to begin with, or in the case of the school prayer bill that we saw earlier this year, to participate in or listen to sort of morning Christian prayer. And it's important to keep in mind, right? Like the Idaho Constitution is not the only one that matters here, right? It's the federal Constitution and federal precedent and law, and current sort of Department of Education guidance on this issue is that, for example, like students can engage in prayer or religious expression during instructional time to whatever degree they can engage in non-religious private expression during this time. So like this is not the state participating in this. It is individual students can like say a prayer before they take a test or something like that, right, to themselves.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily an issue of restricting speech. It's whether or not the government entity themselves is compelling some or prioritizing some version of speech to the students themselves. And to me, that's kind of the main difference between these two bills in terms of like which speech is compelled.
And I do think it's important to note that Louisiana passed an almost identical bill. Their displays would just have to be slightly smaller than Idaho's. We want bigger displays, I guess. And that was blocked by a federal judge in November 2024, with the judge calling it, quote, unconstitutional on its face, end quote. And the case is still under litigation. So it just feels like this would become another Idaho legislature bill that would get tied up in costly litigation and cost taxpayers money over something that's easily shown to be unconstitutional.
I don't disagree with you, Lindsay, except I think that this, like a lot of other, more conservative bills, not just in the Idaho state legislature, but across the country, post Dobbs, post some of these other decisions, are really kind of testing the waters in terms of trying to establish new legal or judicial precedent in some of these areas. They see a new Supreme Court. They see a federal judge as a federal bench that over the next few years is bound to get more conservative. And, precedent does change, and courts do sort of change how they think about these issues, Dobbs being like the shining example of this, right? And so maybe some of these efforts are efforts to get these things in the court system, see which judges they can sort of get to rule on their side, and then maybe this goes up to the Supreme Court and gets a fresh hearing. So we'll have to see how that goes.
Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Switch to Verizon Business and get more from your internet without paying more for your internet. Get LTE Business Internet starting at $39 a month when paired with a Business Unlimited smartphone plan. That's unlimited data, and with it, unlimited possibilities. Start saving today with Verizon Business, ranked #1 in small business internet customer satisfaction by J.D. Power. Starting price for 25 megabits per second internet plan with savings, plus taxes, fees, and economic adjustment charge. Terms apply. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Okay, jumping into picks of the week. I am actually so happy about mine. It's not light, but I think it's fantastic. And that is that this week, the Meridian Library Board of Trustees voted to not ban a book from the Meridian Library District. A parent submitted an application asking for the book The Prince and the Knight, which is a child's fairy tale book by Daniel Hack, to be removed and placed in the adult section. And the Meridian Library Board declined. Just to describe the book, it's got a 4.45 rating on Goodreads, and it's a story of a young prince who falls in love with a knight after the two work together to battle a dragon that is threatening the kingdom. And The person who submitted the application said that was inappropriate. It was disturbing that children had access to it, but it has not been removed from the children's section.
Yeah, I mean, and Lindsay, this is kind of an add-on to, I mean, I know last year there was a lot of discussion around the book bans and the library bill that was going to potentially have some difficult effects on a lot of these local libraries and giving, parents and community members the opportunity to do this and like make these claims. I mean, do you think this is just like another kind of front in this battle, or is this or was this kind of a one-off thing? Like, do you think the Meridian library system is generally coming down on the side of fighting against these bans or keeping these bans in place?
I think they're in that tricky place of having to work within the system, because I don't think they want to, librarians are already being harassed. Library board meetings are becoming more tense. So it seems like they really want to work within the law in the most equitable, fair way that they can. But I do think, a Meridian community member made a video saying, hey, nobody has submitted requests, which I would argue is because most people in our community aren't concerned about the fairy tale books in the children's section. If you don't like them, you don't have to check them out. It's not compulsory. And so there has been kind of a resurge movement. There have been 4 book ban requests submitted within the last month. And so they're going to be addressing those as they've been received and as they're able to be worked through. The library board has 2 months to work through those requests, because they also have to read the book, go through the 18 pages of paperwork. The library director has to review it and give a recommendation. And so I think that this is kind of a resurgence of what we saw a few years ago, where they realized the rest of the community didn't care about banning books. And so now they are restarting that effort. And I'm just happy to see and so glad and thankful that the Meridian Library Board is taking this seriously and coming down on the side of defending the First Amendment.
Plus, we're all about dragons these days. I'm not a reader of like the Fourth Wing book series. I don't know if you are, Lindsay, but
some of my
apparently
children.
A new one just came out. Okay, there you go.
So no, Fourth Wing is big at our house.
Okay, so the dragons can live at least until the end of that particular book. Well, my pick of the week, Lindsay, I'm going to try to end us on a wholesome note.
I appreciate that.
We've had, maybe the news is getting you down. Maybe you want to kind of feel empowered in your community, and especially maybe in a way that doesn't even have to do with politics. Like, frankly, as a political scientist who has to deal with this stuff for my day job, I'm always on the lookout for stuff like this. And luckily, the city of Boise offers a huge variety of opportunities to volunteer and help your community. And one I want to highlight as we look ahead to next week and start to see some warmer weather is the Caring for Parks program. We've got a lot of great parks in Boise, and there are a bunch of different ways that the city gives you to try to do your part and help out. I'll just give a couple of examples. One of my favorites is called the Pollinator Posse. It's a group of volunteers led by experts to provide high quality pollinator habitats by planting and monitoring, pollinator areas in Boise parks. These plants that help pollinators like bees be able to access those areas. You can sort of remove weeds, cover planting beds, monitor for pollinator use. A similar one is the Monarch Butterfly Watch. So monarch butterflies have decreased in population a lot over the past 10, 15 years, thanks to climate change. And Boise Parks and Rec has a program where you can monitor milkweed sites, which are where monarchs really thrive. And then the one I've signed up for starting in March is the Tree Steward program. We are the city of trees after all, and I thought it would be fun to sort of do my part and help out with things like planting new trees, pruning trees that need it, giving them care, little tree checkups to make sure they're healthy. And so I figure in addition to, hopefully helping out my community a little bit, I'm sure going to learn some pretty cool stuff about trees along the way. So I'm super excited.
Okay, those sound amazing. How do people find out more information? How can you get involved? Where can you find out more about these programs?
Yeah, you can go on the City of Boise website and search for the Caring for Parks program. You do have to be 18 or older. And for a lot of these, you have to complete a brief orientation, sign a waiver, but there are no other requirements. So it's just, for me, kind of a way for people who love our city, love its natural space, to kind of be able to contribute something in an organized way and maybe feel a little bit empowered, perhaps in a disempowering time.
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise with us. It was really interesting to hear your perspective on all of these different issues within our state. So thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, as always, Lindsay.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show is produced by Evelyn Avitia, Frankie Barnhill, and me, Lindsay Van Allen. Blake Hunter writes our Hey Boise newsletter, and our music is by Up Is the Down Is The. If you enjoyed our show today, leave us a review. It helps other people find us. We'll be back on Monday with our Capital Chatter. You won't want to miss it.